On Monday, October 7, 1985, the Italian cruise ship ACHILLE LAURO docked at Egypt's Alexandria port. This was the 5th day of the cruise, which had started from Genoa, Italy. The ship carried a total of 748 passengers and 450 crew members. At Alexandria port, 651 passengers disembarked and boarded buses to visit the pyramids in Cairo. Once they left, the ship's captain departed Alexandria port and headed west, steering the cruise ship with the remaining 97 passengers toward Egypt's Port Said, 225 kilometers away. The plan was for the tourists visiting Cairo to rejoin the ship at Port Said after 14 hours. Up to this point, everything was proceeding as planned, but events soon took a turn for the worse. 14 hours later, at exactly 10:30 p.m., the tourists arrived at Port Said, expecting to reunite with their fellow passengers. However, there was no sign of the ACHILLE LAURO. Initially, they were told the ship had been delayed due to traffic in the Suez Canal. But after waiting for 3 hours with no ship in sight, the truth was finally revealed. ACHILLE LAURO had been hijacked. Welcome back to AniFo Verse's new video, viewers. Among the remaining 97 passengers on board were 4 hijackers. They had likely smuggled their weapons onto the ship hidden inside a fuel tank, as their cabin was reportedly filled with a strong smell. Shortly after the ship departed Alexandria port, the hijackers remained in their room using a hairdryer to dry their weapons. At this moment, a waiter entered their room to serve fruit, as the door was accidentally left open. It seems the hijackers hadn't planned to hijack the ship near Alexandria port, but since the situation had been exposed, they acted immediately. They stormed into the dining hall, terrifying passengers and taking them hostage. No one knew who these hijackers were or what their intentions might be. When a hostess asked one of them about their identity, he claimed they were Norwegian nationals. Before the hijackers could reach the ship's radio room, the radio operator managed to broadcast an SOS call, reporting that the ACHILLE LAURO had been hijacked. This SOS call was picked up by a radio station in Sweden. Unaware of this message, the hijackers seized the radio room and shut down the ship's entire communication system. One of the hijackers then used the loudspeaker to summon the ship's captain to the front bridge. When the captain arrived, he was greeted with a burst of machine gun fire. The hijackers shouted something loudly in Arabic and then, in broken English, ordered the ship to head to Tartus, a Syrian port 500 kilometers away. At this point, the captain realized they couldn't possibly be Norwegian nationals. The hijackers instructed the captain to tell the 450 crew members to continue their duties as usual, but to stay away from the hostages. With a gun pointed at him, the captain had no choice but to comply with the hijackers' orders. ACHILLE LAURO was now headed towards Syria instead of Egypt's Port Said. The terrified hostages and crew had no idea what was going to happen to them. The sun was about to set on October 7th, and the hijackers ordered all the hostages to lie down on the floor. Meanwhile, the SOS message received by the Swedish radio station had already caused a global stir. Italy's crisis management team had sprung into action, as the cruise ship belonged to them. But the US initially didn't take the situation seriously. However, when they learned that American nationals were among the passengers, the US crisis management team also got involved. In the eyes of the US, this was a terrorist attack, and their policy was clear. They did not negotiate with terrorists. However, the situation was complicated because 3 different countries were now involved. The passengers included Americans, the ship was Italian, and the hijacking occurred in Egyptian territory. A debate ensued over which country should take action. The US believed Italy should act first, since the ship belonged to them. However, the Italian government wanted to resolve the crisis through negotiations rather than force, as they didn't want to tarnish their reputation in Mediterranean countries. The US, on the other hand, wanted to take a hard stance against the hijackers. As a result, the US advised all Mediterranean countries not to allow ACHILLE LAURO to dock at their ports. By the morning of October 8th, ACHILLE LAURO had reached the Syrian coast. The captain requested permission to dock at Tartus port, but since the US had already alerted everyone, Syrian authorities did not respond. The hijackers then began separating the hostages based on their nationalities, appearing to target Americans and Jews. They separated a total of 20 passengers, including an elderly couple, Marilyn Klinghoffer and her 69-year-old husband, Leon Klinghoffer, who was in a wheelchair. The hijackers ordered the 20 passengers to move to the upper deck, but Leon Klinghoffer, due to his condition, could not go upstairs. His wife protested loudly about leaving him behind, but the hijackers silenced her at gunpoint. Leon Klinghoffer was furious and continued to insult the hijackers. After failing to gain permission for ACHILLE LAURO to enter Syria, the hijackers finally made their demands known to Syrian authorities via radio. One of the hijackers, who appeared to be the leader, announced over the radio that they were members of the Palestine Liberation Front, PLF, and demanded that Israel release 50 of their comrades. The truth was now out. The individuals who had claimed to be Norwegian nationals were, in fact, Palestinians. The leader, Yusuf Majid Mulki, warned that if their demands were not met by 3 p.m., they would start killing the Jewish passengers on the ship one by one. The situation became even more complex as 3 additional parties, Syria, Israel, and Palestine, were directly implicated. As the hijackers' deadline approached, their demands remained unmet, and no negotiation team had reached the ship. At 3 p.m., the hijackers sent a message to the Tartus port authorities, claiming they had killed an American passenger and would kill another next. However, the Tartus officials dismissed their threat and instructed them to leave immediately. Realizing their plan had failed in Syria, the hijackers ordered the captain to set course for Cyprus. Meanwhile, rumors spread through the U.S. intelligence network that an American passenger had been killed, though there was no confirmation. Now that the hijackers' identities were revealed, Italy directly contacted Palestinian President Yasser Arafat, also the chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, to determine if the PLO was involved in the hijacking. Arafat not only disowned the hijacking, but also sent a negotiation team to Egypt, which included Abu Abbas, the leader of the PLF. Through a Cypriot radio station, Abu Abbas communicated with the hijackers, urging them to head to Egypt's Port Said and treat all passengers well. Mulki, the hijacker leader, complied and instructed the captain to set course for Port Said. Upon arrival in Egypt, Abu Abbas apologized to the captain and privately spoke with the hijackers. Italy and Egypt wanted to resolve the crisis without direct involvement, since the issue was tied to the ongoing Palestine-Israel conflict. Neither country wanted to tarnish its hands with someone else's battle. However, the U.S. insisted that these terrorists should not be negotiated with under any circumstances. Despite the U.S. protests, negotiations proceeded. Italy and Egypt proposed handing the hijackers over to the PLO, allowing them to punish the culprits for the hijacking. The following day, October 9th, Captain De Rosa publicly broadcast a radio message assuring everyone that all passengers and crew on the ship were safe. After this message, Italy and Egypt decided to grant the hijackers safe passage. A boat was brought to ACHILLE LAURO, and the 4 hijackers boarded it, disappearing into Egypt's mainland. It seemed as though the negotiations had succeeded, and the hijackers had withdrawn their demands. However, the truth was that the hijackers had forced Captain De Rosa to broadcast the message at gunpoint. When Syrian officials had denied them permission to dock, the hijackers had, in fact, killed a passenger, Leon Klinghoffer, the wheelchair-bound man. They had thrown his body into the sea. News of this horrifying act spread hours later, causing a global outcry. The hijackers, who had been granted freedom, had committed a heinous crime and vanished on Egyptian soil. Now all attention turned to Egypt. Italy demanded that Egypt hand over the hijackers, but Egypt also wanted to avoid involvement. Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak claimed the hijackers had left Egypt and that he did not know their whereabouts. In reality, U.S. intelligence uncovered that Egypt was putting the hijackers on a plane to Tunisia, where PLO representatives were to take them into custody. On October 10th, at 6 p.m., a civilian aircraft of Egypt's Al Mazah Airways was set to take off, carrying the 4 hijackers to Tunisia. However, neither the hijackers, Italy, nor Egypt knew that the U.S. crisis management team planned to intercept the plane mid-air. 4 F-14 fighter jets, 2 Ka-60 air tankers, and E-2C radar planes began patrolling over the Mediterranean. As soon as the hijackers' plane took off, the U.S. Air Force jets were on high alert and started tailing the aircraft. After 1.5 hours in the air, the F-14 surrounded the plane and instructed the pilot to land at the NATO airbase in Sigonella, Italy. The pilot attempted to contact Egyptian Airways, but the E-2C radar planes had already jammed the radio signals. Unable to establish contact, the pilot had no choice but to redirect the plane to Sicily. On October 11th, at 12:10 a.m., the aircraft landed at the Sigonella airbase. No one was aware of this operation. Italy itself found out about it only when the plane was about to land at Sigonella. Since the plane had landed in Italy, the ship was hijacked in Italy, and the murder occurred on an Italian ship. Italy had the primary right to take the hijackers into custody. However, the U.S. wanted custody of the hijackers. The landed plane was surrounded by 80 U.S. commandos, who were in turn surrounded by 300 Italian commandos. A prolonged diplomatic meeting between Italian and U.S. officials followed. Finally, a call from Washington instructed the American soldiers to step back. An agreement was reached between Italy and the U.S. on the condition that Italy would prosecute the hijackers. When the Italian troops entered the plane, they found not only the 4 hijackers, but also an important figure, Abu Abbas of the PLO. Abu Abbas's presence on the plane led to the assumption that he was behind the entire planning. However, it was never confirmed whether Yasser Arafat was aware of the plan or not. Due to a lack of evidence connecting him directly to the hijacking, Italy released Abu Abbas. However, the 4 hijackers were prosecuted and sentenced. The hijacker who killed Leon Klinghoffer was sentenced to 30 years in prison, while the other 3 received sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years. It was later revealed that the hijackers never intended to hijack the ship. Instead, they planned to use the cruise ship to launch an attack on Israel's port of Ashdod. This action was a response to Israeli bombings. Leon Klinghoffer's body was recovered 5 days later, on October 13th off the coast of Syria. After the post-mortem, it was sent back to his home country. We hope you enjoyed this video by AniFo Verse. Don't forget to like it. See you in the next amazing video.